The muzzle was tight against the animal's snout, pressing into fur that bristled like copper wire. But the low, guttural vibration coming from that Belgian Malinois shook the concrete floor beneath my boots. He wasn't just growling. He was vibrating with a rage that felt ancient. The other handlers, men half my age with twice my ego, stepped back, their hands hovering near their holsters or batons. They saw a monster. They saw something broken that needed to be put down or beaten into submission. I looked into those amber eyes, and I didn't see a killer. I saw fear masked as aggression. I saw a soldier who had been pushed too far, too fast, by people who didn't understand the language of silence. They called him psycho. I called him a misunderstood soul. And when I reached for the buckle of that muzzle, the room went dead silent, the air sucked out by the collective gasp of men waiting to see an old black man get torn to shreds. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. I sit here now, on the wraparound porch of my little house in the Smoky Mountains, watching the mist roll off the ridge like smoke from a distant fire. The wood of the rocking chair creaks in a rhythm that matches the ache in my knees. At 68, the body remembers every jump, every long march, every night slept on hard, cold ground. My hands are rough, mapped with scars that look like old riverbeds, each one a story I don't tell often. It's quiet here, the kind of quiet you have to earn. I have my coffee, black and bitter, and the morning air smells of pine and damp earth. It's a peaceful life, a stark contrast to the noise that used to fill my head. But even in this silence, I'm never really alone. The ghosts are polite these days. They sit on the railing and watch the sunrise with me. They don't scream anymore. They just remind me of the weight of survival, of the burden of being the one left to tell the tale. Sometimes it's just a sound that pulls me back. Today it was the jingle of my neighbor's dog collar across the gravel road, that metallic clink-clink sound. It cut through the morning fog and dragged me straight back to Fort Benning, Georgia, 1991. It wasn't the sound of a pet. It was the sound of working dogs, of heavy chains, of the anticipation before a patrol. I closed my eyes, and suddenly the smell of pine was gone, replaced by the stinging scent of ammonia, wet concrete, and the thick, humid air of the South that sticks to your skin like a second layer of clothing. I could feel the tension in my shoulders, that permanent knot that forms when you know you have to work twice as hard to get half the respect. I was back in the kennels, back before the desert, back when I was just Sergeant Thorne, the old-timer who supposedly didn't know new tricks. We were a specialized K-9 unit preparing for deployment to the Gulf. The atmosphere was a mix of testosterone and anxiety. The young guys were pumped up on patriotism and movies, thinking war was going to be a highlight reel. I was the platoon sergeant, the old man in my 40s, surrounded by kids in their early 20s who thought they were immortal. Our routine was grueling. 0400 wake up, miles of running in formation, bite work, tracking, obedience. The kennels were a cacophony of barking, a chaotic symphony of high-drive dogs demanding work. I kept my head down. I did my job. I inspected the gear. I checked the logs. I made sure the dogs were healthy. I loved the dogs more than the people, truth be told. Dogs don't care about the color of your skin or where you came from. They care about your heartbeat. They care about what you project. If you're fake, a dog knows it before you do. But people? People are different. There was a handler named Miller. Tall, corn-fed, with a jawline he probably practiced in the mirror. He was the type who thought volume equaled command. He'd scream at his dog, yank the lead, treat the animal like a piece of equipment that needed percussive maintenance. Miller didn't like me. He didn't say the words, not the slurs anyway, but it was in the tone. It was in the way he'd look past me when I gave a briefing. "Hey, Pops," he'd say, with that smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You sure you can keep up? Maybe you should transfer to the mailroom. Let the real men handle the beasts." It was the boy treatment wrapped in military jargon. He questioned my orders, undermined my authority in front of the privates. It's a subtle violence, that constant chipping away at your dignity. You learn to wear a mask of stone. You don't react, because if you react, you're the angry one. You're the problem. The tension escalated when the new shipment of dogs arrived from Europe. We were short a few Malinois for the upcoming rotation, and they brought in a crate that looked like it was holding a velociraptor. This was the dog they called Psycho. His real name on the papers was Ragnar. He was a darkly sable Belgian Malinois, 80 pounds of muscle and kinetic energy. He had washed out of 2 police programs for severe aggression against handlers. Miller took one look at him and laughed. "I'll take him," he said, puffing his chest. "Just needs a firm hand. I'll break him in a week." I watched Miller try. For 3 days, it was a battle of egos. Miller used the shock collar, the prong collar, the yell. Ragnar just got worse. The dog wasn't learning. He was fighting for his life. He'd lunge at the bars whenever Miller walked by. The base commander was talking about euthanizing the dog before we even shipped out. Liability, they called it. Miller smirked. "Some dogs are just born bad, like some people." He looked right at me when he said it. That night the kennel was dark. The humidity had broken into a thunderstorm, the rain hammering on the tin roof. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Ragnar. I walked down to the kennels, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the rain. When I got to his run, he hit the gate, teeth bared, a demon in the shadows. I didn't yell. I didn't raise my hand. I turned off the flashlight and just sat down on the concrete with my back to the cage. I sat there for an hour, listening to his breathing slow down. I started humming a low, old gospel tune my grandmother used to sing. "Precious Lord, take my hand." I wasn't trying to dominate him. I was sharing the space. I was telling him, without words, "I am here, and I am not going to hurt you." By the time I stood up to leave, he wasn't growling. He was pressing his nose against the wire, sniffing the air where I had been. He smelled the tobacco in my pocket and the lack of fear in my sweat. The next morning was the evaluation. The commander, the vet, and the squad were there. Miller was there with a catch pole, ready to drag Ragnar out to be sedated and likely put down. "Step aside, Miller," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the chatter. Miller laughed. "You got a death wish, Sergeant? Be my guest." I walked to the cage. No catch pole, no shock collar, just a flat leather leash in my hand. I opened the door. The silence was suffocating. Ragnar stood there stiff, staring at me. I turned my body sideways, a signal of non-aggression. I didn't look him in the eye. I looked at his shoulder. "Let's go, son," I whispered. I slipped the lead over his head. He didn't snap. He didn't lunge. He leaned into my leg. I walked him out of that kennel, past Miller's dropped jaw, past the stunned commander, moving together like we'd been partners for years. We went to the training field. The squad followed, whispering. They expected the dog to turn on me any second. I unclipped the leash. "Heel," I said softly. Ragnar glued himself to my left leg. We worked through the obedience course. Sit, down, stay, climb. He moved with a precision that was terrifyingly beautiful. He wasn't working out of fear of punishment. He was working because he finally had a leader who spoke his language. I signaled for the bite decoy to come out, a brave corporal in a bite suit. Ragnar hit him like a freight train, a perfect full-mouth bite, confident and deep. But the moment I said, "out," he released instantly and returned to my side, eyes locked on me, waiting for the next command. I looked at Miller. He looked small. He looked like a boy playing soldier. I patted Ragnar's head. "He's not broken," I said to the group. "He just hates bullies." That moment wasn't just about a dog. It was about every time I'd been underestimated, every time someone looked at my skin and assumed I was less than, or dangerous, or incapable of complex thought. I grew up in Alabama in the 50s. I knew what it was like to be looked at like a stray that needed to be controlled. My grandfather raised coonhounds. He taught me that you can't force a creature to be loyal. You have to earn it. You have to show them that you are worthy of their trust. Ragnar was a mirror. He reflected the energy you gave him. Miller gave him violence, and Ragnar gave it back. I gave him respect, and he gave me everything. It was a mini revelation for the young guys. They realized that strength wasn't about how loud you could yell, but how much control you had over yourself. 2 months later, we were in the sand. The real deal. The heat was different here. Dry, dusty, relentless. We were patrolling a sector near the border, a desolate stretch of scrub and rock. The tension was real now. No more training games. Ragnar was my shadow. We slept together, ate together. The squad had started to call us the Old Man and the Wolf. Miller was still there, leading the second fire team, but he was jittery. The reality of war had stripped away his arrogance, leaving fear in its place. He was jumpy, second-guessing his own dog, a nervous energy that rippled through the platoon. We were clearing a small village, mud brick compounds that all looked the same. Intelligence said it was empty. Intelligence is often wrong. We were moving through a narrow alleyway when all hell broke loose. An ambush. Small arms fire erupted from the rooftops. It was a kill zone. We scrambled for cover behind a crumbled wall. The noise was deafening. The crack of AKs, the shout of orders. Miller and his team were pinned down in the open, behind a rusted truck chassis about 50 yards up. They couldn't move. A machine gun position had them dialed in. They were screaming for support, but we couldn't get a clear shot at the gunner without exposing ourselves. I looked at Ragnar. He was flat on his belly, ears swiveling, waiting. I knew what I had to do. It was a suicide run for a man. But for a dog? Maybe. I had a choice. Miller had spent months trying to humiliate me. He represented every systemic hurdle I had ever faced in my career. In that split second, the dark thought crossed my mind. Let him figure it out. Let him see if his arrogance can stop a 7.62 round. But that's the thing about wearing the uniform and, more importantly, about being a man of conscience. You don't leave people behind, not even the ones who hate you. Because if you do, you become them. I looked at Ragnar and pointed toward the window where the muzzle flash was coming from. It was a flanking maneuver. "Ragnar! Zokin!" I shouted the command for seek. The dog launched. He was a blur of sable fur, low to the ground, moving faster than a human eye could track. The machine gunner didn't see him coming until it was too late. Ragnar didn't go for the kill. He went for the arm. He hit the gunner in the window, dragging him backward out of sight. The gun went silent. The screaming started. The enemy screaming. That pause, that chaos, gave us the 3 seconds we needed. "Move! Move!" I roared. We suppressed the rooftop, and Miller's team scrambled back to safety. When the dust settled, Ragnar came trotting back out of that building, blood on his muzzle, tail wagging slightly. He sat by my boot and looked up, as if to say, "Job done, boss." Back at the extraction point, Miller was shaking. He was covered in dust, his eyes wide and white against the grime on his face. He walked over to where I was checking Ragnar for wounds. Miller looked at the dog, then he looked at me. He tried to say something, but his voice cracked. He had been saved by the broken dog and the old man he wanted to discard. It wasn't a movie moment where we hugged. It was deeper. He nodded. A single, sharp nod of absolute surrender and respect. He realized that the hierarchy he believed in, the one based on race and volume, was a lie. The only hierarchy that mattered out here was competence and courage. That evening, back at base, the colonel called us in. He had the after-action report. He looked at Miller, then at me. Then he pulled a file from his desk. "Miller," the colonel said, "you've been running your mouth about Sergeant Thorne being past his prime." The colonel tossed the file on the table. It spilled open. Photos from Vietnam. Photos of a much younger me holding a sniper rifle, wearing a green beret. Citations for valor that I never wore on my chest because I didn't need the attention. "Sergeant Thorne founded the tracking school you trained at," the colonel said dryly. "He came back into the service at his age because we asked him to. Because he's the best dog handler the Army has ever seen. You're lucky he didn't let that dog eat you in the kennels." I sat there, stone-faced. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just took my file, closed it, and walked out. The silence from the squad as I walked back to my bunk was heavy, but it was a different kind of weight now. It was the weight of reverence. I went back to Ragnar, who was sleeping on my cot. I buried my hand in his fur. We were just two old soldiers doing a job. The revelation didn't change who I was. It just forced them to see what was always there. The years have passed. Ragnar came home with me when he retired. He lived to be 14, a good long life for a Malinois. He spent his last years chasing squirrels in this yard and sleeping by the fire. I buried him under the big oak tree out back. Miller? He stayed in. He eventually became a master sergeant. He wrote me a letter a few years ago. He didn't apologize for the past, men like us rarely do in words, but he told me he was running the kennel program now. He told me he teaches his young handlers that patience is a weapon, and that you can't judge a book, or a dog, or a man by the cover. He signed it. Your student. But war has a price. It's not just the bad knees or the hearing loss. It's the memories. I still see the faces of the men we couldn't save. I still feel the adrenaline dump at 3 a.m. when a car backfires. I look at the spot under the oak tree, and I miss my friend. People think dogs are just animals. They don't understand that in a place where humanity strips itself bare, a dog is the only thing that makes sense. They are the only pure things in a dirty world. I carry the weight of that love and that loss every day. It's a heavy rucksack, but I carry it because I'm strong enough to. If there is a lesson in all this, it's about the danger of underestimating the quiet ones. It's about the racism that blinds people to the value of the human standing right next to them. Miller almost got himself killed because he couldn't see past his own prejudice. He couldn't see that the aggressive dog was just misunderstood, and the old black man was the most lethal asset he had. We are quick to judge, quick to label, quick to discard. But dignity isn't something you give someone. It's something they have that you choose to acknowledge or ignore. And when the bullets fly, the only color that matters is the red of the blood we all bleed. The sun is fully up now. The mist has burned off. I can see the grave marker under the oak tree, a simple wooden cross. I have Ragnar's old leather collar in my hands. The leather is cracked, worn smooth by years of duty. It smells like oil and memory. I rub my thumb over the brass nameplate. Ragnar. I place it back on the mantelpiece, next to the folded flag from my father's funeral. The house is quiet again. I am just an old man on a porch, but I know who I am. And I know what I've done. And that is enough. If this story found you at the right moment, tell me where you're listening from. Sometimes sharing difficult memories helps carry the weight, and I'd be honored to hear yours.